Hello and welcome to Assemblies of the World with me, Anna Isabel, and my beautiful guest today is Mercedes Leal. Hello, Mercedes.
Hello there. Thank you. It's lovely to be with you today.
Well, you've written this book that it's magical, and it's called The Miracle Code. Um, it it's yes, you could see I'm at a little bit of a loss for words because there is just something very beautiful about the way you've written it, and it's very easy to read. And it begins with an NDE experience. Um, Tell us about that.
Okay. To be perfectly frank, I use a lot of words when I'm writing because I really want people to feel the magic of what I have experienced. And in that particular case, I was very stressed, incredibly stressed. I was looking after my mother, who was not very well. I was looking after my daughter, who was extremely feisty. I was holding down a very demanding full-time job and had the usual mortgage, school fees, and stuff to manage on my own. My husband and I were divorced at that point. Actually, no, I don't think we were divorced, but we were definitely separated and a bit. So it wasn't, things weren't going well, even though we ended up as soulmates in the end, platonic soulmates. And so I suspect that that experience chose me because I was at the end of my tether and I needed a lesson. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have done anything silly, but it was really, really difficult. And I went to bed at about midnight, and at about 3 a.m., I suddenly found myself in this beautiful place. I was very restless before that time. And when I arrived there, the first thing that struck me was the love in the atmosphere, in the breezes that caressed my shoulders like a mother's embrace after a long absence. There was love in the trees. The trunks of the trees were paternal. They felt very solid and protective as I walked past this avenue of these massive, I don't know what type of tree they were, but the trunks were huge. The branches were very feminine. I could feel a kind of a maternal or auntified element coming from them. I just felt so loved. And the tendrils of the new leaves were like toddlers playing in my hair as I walked through this avenue. And it was just pure joy. Words in any language would never be able to completely describe what I was feeling. What I realized was when I looked down was that I was transparent, but they were in wonderfully bright 3D color. And then I saw this lady gliding towards me. Instantly, I knew who she was, but I'd never seen her before. I knew that I hadn't seen her in my earth life. And she looked at me telepathically and said, "You must go back. You must go back. Your time is not right." And I said, "Oh, but it's so lovely here." I'm quite stubborn, really. I said, "I love it. It's wonderful. Please let me stay." She said, "No, no, no, no. You have a job to do. You have your mother and you have your daughter. You have things to do for people." And I said, "I think they'll manage. They'll manage without me. It's really so nice here. I've never felt so loved, so accepted. It's just so welcoming." She said, "No, you must go back." I said, "No, I'm not going." And it was as if she was having so much trouble kicking me out of this heavenly realm that she summoned help from behind me. And I could feel the communication, but I was completely cut off. I had no idea what they were saying or communicating with each other. And almost instantly, I felt this presence of love that was around me, magnifying so many times. And as it grew closer to me, I could feel it coming towards me very, very slowly. And then when it was parallel to where I was or immediately adjacent to me, I felt this love to such a degree that there are literally no words in any language to describe that connection. I felt such a oneness immediately. And then this figure, which was in the shape of a man, a tall man, I don't know, 10, 12, could be even 14 feet high, quite very, very tall, with a very bright robe of light, with a swirling skirt, like you could almost call it, but it was all in one piece. It looked like a caftan of sorts, but it was very voluminous and very very bright, beautiful, not too bright that you couldn't look at it, but just enticingly bright. And then it glided majestically ahead of me very, very slowly, which was really disappointing because I thought it had come to get me in some way, but it went a little bit further and then it turned. It stopped and looked back at me from about 10 or 12 feet in front of me. And that was a moment, that was another upgrade in my life because the love again went up another notch. But as that being looked at me, I realized I was there for a purpose. And I was then put through two of the most beautiful, again, indescribable acts of tuition that I would love everyone to be able to experience. I'll just give you a glimpse of the first one. I was shown a pole of light, and that pole of light represented purest, altruistic, divine love, love at its highest. And then I was shown all the different types of love one could have: mother for children, father for children, children for parents, grandparents for grandchildren, couples. I mean, it was just full of love. And the message that I was downloading simultaneously was that this is the blueprint for humanity. This is your message. You have to pass on this message, that there is no love unless that divinity is at its core and is practiced not just every day, but every second of your being. And when I got that message, I realized what a fake I'd been, because I thought I'd always been so loving in my life. But that showed me that I was falling way, way, way short. And then I was put through another one, which is so personal, it would be very difficult for me to say that without bursting into tears. But in a nutshell, the overall message was that love is key to a happy life. Love is key to life on earth. And that love emanates from within. Now, the spirit is bigger than the human body, but we access it through the heart, through the feelings. And that, of course, in a human is inside. So the lesson is, once you can access this incredible information and this energy, which I go at length for the rest of the book to explain how to achieve, you literally enter a very special domain. I don't want to say kingdom, because then people will say, oh, that's a bit sexist. What about the queens? But you literally, there's a door. There's a door that opens to your true identity as a human, because it's not just the eternal spirit. We're in a school of sorts, and we have to realize that every pain, every negativity, every disappointment, every bereavement is a lesson. Once we can turn those around to see that they're just temporary tutorials, the worst elements of life then become much more manageable, and we can use those as stepping stones to get a little bit higher in that wonderful realm. I hope that explains it without too many confusions.
No, it's very clear. But I guess the question that I have in my mind goes along these lines. You know, when we are working to overcome a fear or a phobia, let's say, let's take my dog, for instance. He is not comfortable with dogs that are big and boisterous, and is very afraid of them and gets quite narky, to put it mildly, when he sees them. Now, if I'm going to help him, then the process is very delicate. I might attempt desensitization in a very slow way. Yeah. Because if I don't, he's going to feel overwhelmed and he's going to be flooded. And because he's flooded, he can't learn anything new. Mm-hmm. If we transpose that example into the experience of human beings, let's take this time that we are in, which is actually pretty overwhelming for the average person, whether they understand what is going on in the world or not. They are very aware that life has become increasingly challenging. So I guess my question is, why is it that the designer, the teacher of the lessons, seems to be flooding us with trauma, which could actually end up trapping us in trauma rather than I think what I'm saying is it's a risky business when we're trying to help people to get out of trauma, or when we are stimulating them to see things in a different way. Because the risk is they're going to get trapped in fear and trauma and pain, and they're not going to be able to get out. So there's a question in there somewhere. I think you're following my train of thought, but I'm just wondering why the intensity is so huge at this point in time, when it's so risky in terms of the damage it can do to individuals.
That is a very good question. And it kind of relates to the experiences I have had in the book, because I was constantly saying, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why does everybody else seem to have it so easy? But every time you overcome one of those lessons, you literally go up another notch, and you'll find a few more miracles appearing, because this is literally about miracles being our rights, not privileges. And there's several answers to that question. The second one would be, each of us has a different path, and we're very empathic as humans, or a lot of us are empathic. We're becoming even more empathic. We feel for other people when they're going through trauma and pain and disappointment and bereavement. And I'll come to that in the next answer. But we cannot live other people's lives for them. We can only do our best. And after we've done our best, our jobs are technically over. We cannot go through those experiences for them. We can do everything we can. We can support them. We can be there for them. We can be on the phone with them for hours. We can send them flowers. We can send them presents. We can invite them over. We can make them their favorite meals every week or day or whatever. But ultimately, the experience is theirs to go through. And it's like a hoop of development, because Earth is a kind of reform school. We are here because we have to shave off those jagged edges in some way, and we can only do them by undergoing the experiences that we may possibly have caused in a previous existence, or we may be at risk of renewing in a future incarnation. But the third and most important thing is that we have to realize that humanity's lives go in cycles. And take the Hindu yugas, for example. They have, I think it's 6 different cycles. You have the golden age, or it might be 8, but you have the golden age of Satya, which is at the helm of this culture, where everything is fullest consciousness, everybody's kind, you communicate telepathically, there's no illness, people are giants, they're very healthy, they live to incredible ages. And very slowly, because of the different influences, the electromagnetic frequencies around Earth, or in the world, in the universe in general, and the positions of various cosmic things, slowly start to change. They slowly start a downward trend. So you go through various cycles, becoming a little harsher, a little smaller, a little more stupid, a little more selfish, until you come, a little more evil even, until you come to the bottom, the opposite of that top golden age. Well, Plato called it the golden age of Satya because it was such a beautiful era. And then you come to this era where people are shorter, they're grumpy, they're selfish, they are taught. We literally have been taught as those ages descended, we have been taught how to be selfish. We are taught competition in schools, for example, instead of collaboration. So people have this, if they haven't had really good parenting, they have a selfishness that they develop thinking is normal. You have to have the best. You have to have the biggest house. You have to live in the best street. You have to have the best car. And they are selfish and tend to think less of others because they're so focused on their own personal development. And then you come to the end of that era, which I'm glad to tell you we've now reached. So we are getting all the detritus from all of that negativity that we have to deal with, because those less than happy souls are desperate to cling to that power. But the consciousness is in the favor of humanity at large. So humanity is waking up, seeing through all of the deception, realizing the education was wrong, and are teaching themselves how to be better people. So they're moving out of that era of control, which is not going down well with the former despots because they want that control to be retained. So the issue is, at the end of every era, which lasts for about 2,500 years, there is invariably a massive catastrophe by freezing, flood, or fire. It can come from any one of those elements. And we have, well, not we, but archaeologists have discovered various bits of evidence about that in soils, in frosts, in all sorts of various ways to show how these events occurred over a very, very, very long period of time. Some people say the yugas are longer than that, they're hundreds of thousands of years, but I have just read a fabulous book I would highly recommend. I mean, I'd love to push my own book, but miracle code. But I have to also tell you that there is an amazing author by the name of Bibhu Dev Misra, who's just written a book called Yuga Shift. And that Yuga Shift gives very well-researched and detailed information about what has happened in the past and how it's affecting us now. It's one of the best books I've ever written. He does a really good job of explaining these cycles. And they coincide with the more Western precession of the equinox, which is more an astrological cycle. So it doesn't matter whether you read the Aztec history or the ancient, I'm trying to think of the others, the ancient Peruvians, I've forgotten what they call themselves, or any of the other historical accounts that have been left for us in various codes and manuscripts. They all say the same thing. And Bibhu Dev Misra has done a brilliant job. So if anybody wants to know that in greater detail and where we're going and how we're getting there, I can highly recommend his book called Yuga Shift, Y-U-G-A, Yuga Shift.
So what you're describing is an actual process of devolution to further evolution. So because we tend to think in terms of a very linear one direction of evolution. That's how we tend to perceive these things. But if we look at things differently, if we take a different perspective that involves cycles, we could be looking at spirals, or we could be looking at cycles of devolution in order to evolve further again. So that's a very interesting concept.
Yes, it's really quite reliable in its pattern, in that it has been discovered that it's approximately every 2,500 years that there is a new epoch, a new era. And depending on whether you're in the descending cycle or the ascending cycle, you're either going towards a darker evolution or a brighter, lighter, more conscious one. And we're very lucky. We're going upwards to the next, which is the age of Aquarius. And we know we've been singing about that since the 60s, the age of Aquarius. But for those of For those of us who are old enough, not you, you're not included in that.
Um, okay, so there is light at the end of this seemingly increasingly dark tunnel. And coming back then to your experience, were you given any instructions for how you were going to proceed with your life upon your return?
Yes, that's a very interesting question because those instructions came by downloads. Um, when I had the experience, I felt because in the second initiation that I was given, the being and I became one. And I felt that majesty, and I realized that it wasn't just me, that majesty is in everyone. So the mission I was given was to show that majestic presence within every single cell. And those cells all have an automatic intelligence. It's an involuntary intelligence. You don't have to think if you're in a coma, something just keeps you living. You don't have to think if you have a cut, something restores the health of that skin. And whether you are an atheist, whether you're agnostic, or whether you're a believer, makes no difference. That energy still loves and works towards keeping you at your optimal levels. Whether you've had one piece of cake too many, whether somebody who is a drinker has had one drink too many, that life force, that light within the intelligence of every cell is constant. It's 24/7 in every single living thing. So if people can identify more with that love, which is them, it's in their cells. It's the light of their spirit. And as I said, the spirit is much bigger than the human body, but people tend to think more of the material element of their being. They think more of being a human. What I'm trying to help them to understand is that they're far more a spirit, far more a being. We are human beings, and we're taught to focus on the human, which needs exercise, it needs to be bathed, it needs to be fed, it needs to be watered. Spirit only craves light and love. And that is what we're working towards, to enhance those two qualities. And they are completely free and they're very easy to develop if you know how to get there authentically and with optimal integrity and authenticity, because it can't be faked.
There's a couple of things that come to mind as you were speaking, and that is the fact that in order for life to be sustained in this physical world, we need to tend to it. We need to look after it. We need to nourish it. So I hadn't thought of it like this before, but perhaps one of the reasons why we're here is because being in this physical world requires us to love in order to care for. And so, we can care for others and look after others through becoming parents. We can look after plants, we can look after animals. But ultimately, the hardest one to remember is to look after our own bodies. We are really good at neglecting that. And yet, if we follow the logic that there is a loving creator within us, by neglecting to care for ourselves, we're neglecting the greatest gift we were given, which is to be an expression of that creator.
Yeah.
It's quite a thought, isn't it? It makes you kind of just stop.
Yeah, it's quite powerful. The thing is, we tend to think of the creator through our human logic, and it doesn't work that way, because the being, that creator, does not expect anything of us. It just loves. And this is a lesson for us. We shouldn't be judging others if they fail to make the grade, and we shouldn't judge ourselves negatively. The key is awareness. And I always write awareness with a capital A, because it is such an important word. Because awareness alerts us to when we're doing something wrong. You suddenly start to feel it. When you become more aware, you'll be ticked off in your head when you slip up in some way. And those are the triggers that we need to be constantly cognizant of. We need to be constantly aware of those triggers, because they are the keys to our development. But there's nobody marking an exam in this lifetime. I felt that I would be shown when I went into this other realm that I would have a tunnel and lights. There was none of that. I just went from my bed into this fantastic realm, and I thought I would be judged. I always heard people say when I was at Sunday school, God is he's going to watch you, and you're going to blah, blah. Nothing like that. The creator is only love, just pure divine love. There is no judgment. There is no, how can I put this? There's no assessment. All of that is done voluntarily by your own spirit when you become aware. So you drive, you're the driver of your own vehicle, really.
I was listening to someone today, and in an interview, and he was entertaining the belief. I think actually it wasn't entertaining. He is of the opinion that when we turn away from light, and go into darkness, that we are separating ourselves from God, which is I don't think that's a controversial statement in the slightest. It's very clear. And people do that in any number of ways. But what stopped me in my tracks was he then said, and how he came to this conclusion was through, he seems to be a polymath where philosophy and mathematics and physics are concerned. But he then came back and said that hell is the absence of light, the absence of God, but that God cannot see you. It's like God turns away. God cannot see you if you go into that darkness. And I'm not sure what to make of that statement yet. It's only been in my head for a couple of hours. I haven't quite digested it fully yet. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on that view.
Well, my thoughts are obviously subjective, because I can only speak from my own experiences, and I've learned to fully respect other people's. But I see that quite differently, because the creator, first of all, did not say, I am God, because at the end of this experience, I said, who are you? I knew I was going to be sent back to my mundane life. And the response was, I am the creator of all that is. You have a duty to perform. You must go back. And then I saw all these flashes of my duties. And then he added at the very end, but whatever you do, you'll be loved. So that did not allow me to necessarily go out and chop down all the trees and cuff people or, behave badly, because the lesson was such, there was so much beauty in living by that divine code, that the rewards were literally unspeakably great. The beauty of feeling that brilliant shimmering light within, and knowing that you're never alone. It doesn't matter whatever crisis you might be going through, and believe me, I've faced a few of those. you have that glorious, loving, accepting, totally non-judgmental presence within. So when people say that God is da 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 da, I realize they're not speaking about the creator. They're speaking about some other man-made entity that has nothing to do with that divine presence. And I think that's really sad.
I think it's very interesting because people have been having the same argument about the nature of God for thousands of years now. And we only need to look at Hermetic texts to see the different interpretations of what God is. And, you know, we have the Stoics with their version, and then we have others with their version. And it seems that these ideas get recycled
Exactly.
again and again. It seems like each generation finds its proponents, or its put it a different way, that each version of the definition of God finds its allies in each generation, and that they express it differently according to the language of the time. But the same ideas get regurgitated again and again and again, and we're still having these arguments centuries later. So why I find the near-death experiences so fascinating is that although the experiences are always unique according to the person's personal experience, and it has to be that way, because if spirit is communicating with you, they have to communicate in a way that you're going to understand and can reach you. So that's one thing. But then the other thing is that they all talk about this unconditional love that's there. And that, to me, has got to be the best bit of evidence we've got, is people coming back and going, oh, hey, this happened to me. I just want to share that with you. You know?
That's very interesting. And it's understandable in a way because, again, you know, everybody's subjective. We don't all have exactly the same experiences. Some people say they saw Jesus, or they may say they saw some other saint. Before that experience, I said God. I thought God was a judge, and if you did wrong, you probably would go to. I believed in the concept of heaven and hell. And I was very gently corrected in that divine experience that there is only one creator. He didn't say, I'm the only creator. And you know, the thing that struck me most of all was that he was jolly. This was not a dour figure of some sort of educational realm. This was a jolly, twinkling, humorous individual. There was so much joy in that energy that I realized that humor, which I've always thought, humor is a part of this love upgrade. If you can make people laugh, I mean, just to give an example, in the 70s, or it might have been the 60s, I think it was the 70s, there was an American, a chap called Norman Cousins. He started a whole medical revolution in that he had some sort of allegedly terminal condition. And when doctors told him there was nothing they could do for him, he decided he'd book himself into a hotel, eat what he wanted, and just watch comedies. I think he took Bud and Costello or one of those other dual comics, and he just took reams and reams, you know, lots of reels of film, and he just stayed in this hotel, eating and drinking as he pleased and watching these comedies, and he laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And I think it was after 3 or 6 months, he thought, hang on a minute, I should be dead. What's going on here? So he checked with his doctor to make sure that he was, definitely going to die, and found that he had been completely cured of his ailment, which was supposed to have been incurable. So the conclusion of that was that humor and having a good time was his actual cure. Now, I did something similar because after that near-death experience, I had a horrific prognosis given to me for my mother by several different doctors because I kept trying different ones. I thought, no, somebody's got to give me good news. No, same news. Your mother is imminently terminal. And based on that premise of Norman Cousins, I decided to create a calendar of joy for my mother. So I gave her a foolscap pad and I said, Mom, I'd like you to write down every single thing you'd like to do in your life or everything you'd like to have. And for me, it made me feel so humble because I knew she'd been the most wonderful mother. And to hear this news and to realize that because I'd been working and I was looking after my daughter, I was having to cope with so many different multifarious responsibilities as a divorcee, I felt I really have to make it up to my mom now and give her the best, however long or short it might be. And she was writing and writing and writing and writing all these things. And we had a bit of a laugh because one of them was to meet Neil Diamond. I said, Mom, I don't think I'm going to manage that one. Anyway, she was just tongue in cheek. Well, based on that blueprint of things that my mother wanted to experience or to receive in her life, I was very lucky that she lived nearly 16 extra years, confounding the medical profession. And she was happy, she was joyful, she traveled with me. I had to get permission from her cardiologist to travel because, this heart was really packed up. And I would fly if she couldn't travel. I mean, she was in intensive care at one point. And I said, Mom, right, that's it. What would really make you happy? And she said, oh, I would love to see my son again. I thought, great, Mom. I went home, got out the credit card, called my brother. I said, book yourself a flight. Come and see Mom. And he said, oh my God, can I bring my partner? I said, sure. He said, can I bring my son? I said, sure. And he brought his little family up with him. And my mother was out of hospital within a couple of days, despite not being expected to recover. I have lots of examples like that. I could keep you chatting, until Easter, because there's so many wonderful ways to keep people vibrant, inspired, and living. Many.
And ultimately, I think this is the thing that we need to remember. And in fact, your story just reminded me of a nurse I once knew, a conversation I had with her. And she had been a nurse working in intensive care for many years. And I don't remember how the conversation came about. But I remember her saying they always knew which patients were going home. And how they knew which patients were going home is that the ones that went home were the ones who had family, who came to visit. And the ones who didn't really have many visitors were the ones who rarely got home again.
Wow.
So this is the power of love. And I think it's because it's through that love that joy exists. And so I guess then in times like this, we need to hug a lot more and laugh a lot more.
Definitely. That's a good formula. Live, love, love, the 3 L's.
Yeah. Yeah, it did come back to that, didn't it? Wow. Well, what an extraordinary experience that you had. I have one last question for you. Do you know that your body had actually stopped working at that point, so that it was technically a near-death experience, or was this an out-of-body experience?
I If I'm honest, I cannot answer that with any accuracy. But when I was in that realm, I was completely transparent. There was no physical me. I was just an energetic form wafting through this wonderful realm. And the strange thing was, they knew me, they recognized me, they welcomed me like a long lost missing person. The trees and the other energies that were around me, because even the grasses were welcoming. There was a loving element in every single thing, including the breezes, as I alluded to earlier.
Listening to you and hearing, people talking about out of body experiences, it strikes me that it feels more like a near death experience. Because when people are talking about out of body experiences, they have every intention of coming back. And you certainly have no intention of coming back. You wanted to stay. So I think for me, that's what defines it. I just have another question for you. And that is, in your experience, you were so connected with plant consciousness. Is that something that you had always felt, or is it something that arrived in that moment? And if so, has it stayed with you?
Did you say plant consciousness?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's quite strange. Prior to that experience, I used to love cut flowers. The bigger, the better. But after I had that experience, I found that flowers in a vase to me represented death. As soon as they arrived, I thought, oh my God, they're dying. So I stopped that. And I mean, I love it when friends send me flowers, but I keep tactfully saying, I'd really rather receive a plant if you must send something. But the one thing I wanted to mention to you, which told me that I'd actually been in that divine realm, was not just the two amazing initiations that completely changed all of my prior Christian beliefs, was that the individual that wanted me to go to leave that realm was somebody whom I recognized, but I had to wait 10 years for confirmation that that person really existed, because I discovered I was firm. I knew who it was. I knew the identity. I knew the relations. And the relation said to me, yes, she did exist, but I could not confirm it 10 years ago because I had buried the knowledge of that death because it was so painful. So when you asked me if that person existed, I could not speak. It's taken me 10 years to find the courage to tell you that you really did go somewhere else. And that individual was actually, she thought she was going to die, and she wanted me to know the truth before she died. So that was for me like a closing of the chapter. Well, I said closing of the chapter, not the book, because I still feel the elements of that realm. Once you've visited it, it never leaves you. In fact, it's in every one of us. It's just that most of us have forgotten, and I had certainly also forgotten.
Yeah. Interesting. I was thinking about the plants and the aliveness of them and the connection that you had with them. And it did make me wonder whether that was new. It seems like it was new. And it seems like bits of that have certainly stayed with you.
Yes. Plants are incredibly intelligent. There have been experiments done with a guy called Cleve Baxter. Cleve Baxter was a CIA, actually, I'm not sure if he was CIA. Some people said he was CIA, but he was a lie detector expert in the 60s. And he did an experiment with plants whereby he somebody else cut a branch, and the lie detector obviously registered disturbance. I'm saying obviously, but it did register disturbance. And he was shocked to find that every time the individual who cut the plant went anywhere near the plant, the lie detector again registered this uneasy feeling. So it was as if the plant recognized the individual who had cut it and didn't like that at all, which made me feel really awkward when I had to, at times, cut off a dead branch off a plant. I used to wonder, well, maybe I shouldn't cut this. But then when you applied your logic it would be like maybe it's better to let it drop off by itself, but you have to say which is better for the plant, to be passing energy to that thing that is going to fall off anyway.
You
Or
know, I've wrestled with that being a gardener on many an occasion, and I have come to the conclusion that everything is about intention,
yeah,
and that if you approach the plant with respect and reverence and the intention to do something that is going to be kind to it,
yeah, that's beautiful.
I think that that is very different to approaching a plant to cut it as an experiment.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that that is probably the answer to everything, because it's it's the respect for life and the sanctity of all life that is the sacred key, I think.
that is so beautifully put. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, one of the most advanced in terms of, I hate the word spiritual because it's just so overused, but one of the most advanced conscious individuals I've ever met was a German. And I hired him to teach my then partner and my mother transcendental meditation, which I had learned many, many years before. It was so helpful. I wanted them both to have it. Unfortunately, both fell asleep, so they didn't really do very well. But with every class, they fell asleep. But what this guy said to me, and he worked with one of the most accomplished and famous gurus in the world. And he said two things. He said, Mercedes, you would not believe how fractured this spiritual life really is behind the scenes. He said, and in terms of diet, because I was trying to find a really healthy diet for my mother and my partner. And he said, the best things you could do, he said, would be to leave foods in the soil. Don't eat carrots, don't eat beetroot, don't eat turnips and sweets and all those root crops. He said, they are quite happily in the soil and you disturb them. You don't need to eat those things. He said, and you shouldn't have to cut things like lettuces either. He said, the best things we should do to eat in an ideal world would be to wait for the berries and the apples to just drop from the tree as gifts. And you know, that made such a big difference to me. I wish I could live like that. Obviously, in an apartment, you know, it's not that easy. But these are principles I would like to take with me into my next life if I'm blessed enough to have another one, or cursed enough to have another one. I don't know which.
That is a very beautiful thought and a very beautiful idea. But I think man cannot live on fruit alone. And we come back to remembering not to take without respect and reverence, because when we take, that's what we're doing. We're taking something from something else. And so we must approach that with reverence and gratitude. So I think that that is a very different way of approaching than what we are taught, which is about entitlement, and that's very, very different. So,
sorry to interrupt you, but you see, the key is, and what you said is so important, it's according to what we were taught. Because I have known of individuals who have just existed on a little bit of water and berries and fruit and sun gazing. I mean, people don't understand the power of something like sun gazing. If you do it at the right times of the day, the very beginning and the very end of the sun's life, first half hour or the last half hour of sunrise and sunset, because you can actually derive similar nutrients to what the cow or the goat or sheep has to eat from the sunshine that goes into the grass for chlorophyll. You can actually have those processes going on in your own body through sun gazing, where your appetite drops And the best thing is that you can store that light, probably in your pineal gland, for months, for winter months, so that people don't have those winter blues.
There is a practice, I believe, amongst Hindus, and the name of it escapes me, but basically it is about living on air and doing exactly what you have said, minus the berries. It's literally in fact, in the more extreme cases, there is no water either. It is living on air. And that is something that, however interesting and maybe even laudable, is beyond the reach of the average human being.
Sure.
So we're back to approaching everything with reverence and respect once again, and gratitude. Mercedes, on the subject of gratitude, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
And a reminder to everyone that the book that we have been discussing is called The Miracle Code. And if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Well, they can find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Facebook. And I'm on a couple of others, but I really don't have the time to do them anymore. But Facebook or LinkedIn. My website, which is themiraclecode.co.uk. It's somewhat ignored, I'm ashamed to say, but and my email addresses have been stuck because I have a new computer and I couldn't import them. But themiraclecode.co.uk is another way to get the book if they wish. And the email address would be ML, which is Mercedes Leal, at themiraclecode.co.uk.
Great. And I'll be putting a link both to the book and to the website and your Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much once again.
It's such a pleasure. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much, Anna, for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.